Well, hello friends, and welcome to Jocelyn's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model. I was just experimenting with a different inflection. I don't think I'll keep it. No, I am just back from a long tour and I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to talk about a subject that I have been thinking about for a very long time. Sometimes new photographers who I work with are very unsure how to treat their models, and to their great credit, a great number of them as a result look after us very well indeed. Another minority treat us abysmally as professional models. Now, I am aware that by talking to you, I am talking to an audience of people who do care about what models think, because if you didn't care, why would you be watching this? And the people who need to hear this loud and clear will not be watching. But just in case one or two of them are, I want to discuss this subject, which is how to treat your model properly. If I had one grand patron photographer and he was the only person I worked with, he would have to pay me, I guess, about £1 a year for that privilege. Fortunately, most of us models do not look for a grand patron. We look for many photographers to book us for short periods of time. I'm aware that booking a model is an expensive expense indeed, but we keep our prices below what they would be if you had to hire us like employees and pay us an annual salary. So, as a result of this, we have some expectations about fair use. Some people, when they hire us for 2 hours, half a day or a day, drive us beyond any reasonable expectation of what should be done to a model. For example, I was in Singapore about 7 years ago and I was hired for a day by a photographer. Now, in my terms and conditions, I say that a full day equates to 7 to 8 hours, assuming it'll be an 8-hour continuous period with about an hour's break for lunch. This photographer said he wanted to collect me from my hotel at 6 a.m. and take me to a wetland reserve. Then he wanted to drive me back to my hotel so I could rest for an hour before he was going to drive me to a studio for the rest of the shoot. Now, my expectation was that that would mean starting at 6, finishing maybe 3 o'clock. Duly, we met at 6 o'clock, he drove me to the wetland reserve. We worked for 3 or 4 hours and I got bitten to death by mosquitoes. By this point, it had rained on me as well extensively, so my hair was wet and my makeup was ruined. We drove back to the hotel so I could have my rest for an hour, and I spent that hour washing and drying my hair and reapplying my makeup, so not really a break at all, I was working. Then he drove me to the studio. At 8 o'clock that night, I was still working. Now, his expectations were, I think, unfair, but also my managing the situation was poor, so I'm not putting all the blame on him. When he said he wanted to start the shoot at 6, I should have said, okay, that means you can shoot till 2 p.m. this afternoon. But I didn't do that because I hoped that he would understand the fair use policy for photographers who are unsure about how to treat models. This may be an imperfect analogy in some people's opinion, but in my opinion it is a beautifully perfect analogy, because models are like library books. You do not own a model or a library book, you merely borrow her with the expectation that she will be passed on undamaged to the next user. Quite often for models, that's another photographer the next day. So that begs the question, what is appropriate for library books? Let's ask Amelia. The first thing I want to say is, as models are like library books, don't damage us. By which I mean, don't take us to a wetland reserve where you have not prepared by getting mosquito repellent. It will damage us, and then you will be handing on a model who is not only upset and in discomfort, but is also going to be an absolutely bloody Photoshop nightmare for the next borrower, the photographer who's working with her the next day. This is not acceptable. Don't burn her with chemicals. Yes, it's happened. To me, yes. Don't mark her. That's just the rule. Because she's got to go and do her job again the next day and the next day and the next day for however long she's touring. If you borrowed a library book, opened it, and you discovered it was full of scribble, crumbs and chewing gum, and you would probably feel quite aggrieved with the library that lent you the book, and possibly the borrower before you. Similarly, if you're a photographer, do Do you really want other photographers in your community to resent you and talk about you behind your back, saying, God, he's awful, he treats models really badly? You don't want models who won't accept your booking in the middle of a tour. Don't be that guy. It doesn't make you look good to other photographers or to models. We are cheaper because we're borrowed. If you had to pay us an annual salary, you probably wouldn't be able to afford it. It works in everyone's best interest for us to be able to work with multiple photographers on a tour and for you to be able to work with multiple models in a year. I would say by abusing models who you've borrowed for the day, you are going to impact your future opportunities to work with models. I don't work with people who I think are going to damage me, especially if I think they're going to do it just through lack of respect and thought for me. If you borrow a library book, there's an expectation from the library that you will return that book on time. The same applies to models. By this I mean, if a model is working with you for a day, let that shoot finish on time so that she can get to her next shoot or to her accommodation for that night so she can ready herself for the shoot the next day. This is something that seems to happen more prevalently on location shoots, where some photographers imagine that the time it takes to get from one location to another shouldn't count as part of the shoot. Unfortunately, it needs to, because if our shoot is going to start at 9 in the morning and not finish till 9 that night, realistically, I probably can't do a full day's work the next day if I have to travel any distance at all. My rates are based on me being able to work more or less a full day each day during a tour. And if you force me to break the integrity of my tour by not being able to do that, realistically it's going to have to cost you. If a model is staying with you and perhaps you're working with her for multiple days, it also is probably wise to think about making sure she gets adequate rest. I know that there is sometimes a tension between photographers and models, because quite a lot of photographers who book professional models are themselves amateurs, which means often they're shooting for fun. Some of my favourite photographers are amateur photographers, but occasionally I find photographers who lose sight of the fact that this is my job. You, as an amateur photographer, may have a month to recover before your next shoot. I, as a professional model, do not have that luxury. So my being kept up till 11 o'clock at night looking at your photographs probably isn't the kindest thing to do to me, simply because if I'm going to do a good job for you the next day, there's stuff I need to be doing. That is not to say I'm not going to be sociable with you if I stay with you, because one of the great pleasures of my career is the fact that I get to socialise with photographers who I stay with. But there is a limit to how much socialising I can do when I'm also trying to do a good job for you in front of the camera. The very best hosts of models are ones who appreciate that the inner workings of our career have to happen during the time that we are not in front of the camera, and that stuff does take some time, and it's not really fair to expect us to carve that time out of the time we should be sleeping, if only because it means it's going to impact on how good a job we can do for you the following day. This is a really difficult thing to say because I love staying with photographers on many occasions. This is a great thing to do, and many of you are super hosts. But because it's something that not only have I experienced lots in my career, but I know many other models have experienced in their careers, I think it's worth mentioning. Okay, this is where my analogy possibly falls down a little bit. Don't get us cold. Books, I guess, are maybe a little bit less fragile in terms of cold. But if you get your model cold, she's more likely to break. There is a reason why gymnasiums and dance studios have heat. If you take me into a lake in October at 6 a.m. and then want me to do the splits, the chances of me injuring myself are so much higher than if we were in a warm dance studio. So probably it's good for the model in terms of health and for you in terms of the result of the shoot if you don't get her so cold that she can't bend. Don't break her spine, chaps. No. Also, it's worth bearing in mind that if you get a model really, really cold, then her energy levels are going to go way down. So the chances of you getting a really productive 8 hours out of someone you've already made freezing cold first thing in the morning is significantly diminished, in my opinion. Do not put us in danger. It doesn't happen often, but it happens significantly often enough for me to be angry about it. If you're doing bondage, you need safety scissors. That's the only kind of scissors appropriate to take on a bondage shoot. If you don't have any in your bag, you shouldn't be carrying rope with you at all. Yes, sorry, they cost about £1.50. There is no excuse. Don't make us climb up tall things in high heels and expect everything to just be okay because we're models and our balance is perfect. That's not necessarily the case. You need a contingency plan. One of the most common ways of injuring yourself at work is just through falling. It's probably kind and also responsible to try to minimise the chances of anyone falling off anything at a shoot. I've already said it, but I just want to say it again. Don't abuse the fact that we offer you a rate based on being able to fit multiple shoots into a week. If you had to pay us all by the week, the shoots would get really expensive really fast. Now, if I choose to work 30 days without a break, that's my fault. And if I'm tired at your shoot, yes, you have every right to be aggrieved. But if I've taken all reasonable precautions to make sure I'm doing a manageable amount of work on a tour, then please meet your model halfway and make sure that you are not the person who derails her tour by exhausting her, damaging her, or making her do dangerous things. My background is as a dance model. I'm totally used to people bringing pictures of dancers along to shoots as inspiration. However, don't force your model into positions that she can't naturally do. The chances of damaging her are suddenly far higher when you do this. No, don't. I know it's hard if you've got an idea in your mind and you want to get the picture, but if it's not working, move on. Don't try to force it because it's just not worth it. You might be the reason she has to take 3 months off work, and that's not going to do your reputation any good at all. Be careful. Don't force us into the splits. If you wanted a plumbing manual, would you borrow this book? I'm suspecting probably not. If you wanted a book about learning French, similarly, this book would not be useful. Consequently, don't book us for things we don't do. It's absurd. Late last year, I had an experience with a photographer who annoyed me excessively by trying to shoot open leg pictures with me. For those of you not in the industry, open leg means explicit nude. It's not something I really want to do. However, there are many models who are excellent at open leg nude. I can recommend plenty of my friends. I do not do it well. And being forced by someone who booked a closed leg model but who wants an open leg model is very tedious because I won't do it. I'll just say no. It will bring horrible negativity into the shoot, and really just get the book you want. You could go searching the internet to find the most explicit pictures of any given model that you could possibly find and then try to get her to do it during the shoot by saying, well, you already did it for E&T or whoever. Yeah, you could do that. But what I think is a much wiser course of action is to look at the model's portfolio, look at what she advertises doing, because that is a great indication of what she actually wants to do, what she likes doing, what she's comfortable doing. Don't go on a vagina safari across the internet trying to find stuff that is beyond her normal levels and then assume because you've booked her for 2 hours on a studio day she'll want to do the same with you. This is a conversation that could go on for a very, very long time and does on all the modelling forums all the time. But I would like to say that you don't know the circumstances. If you see more explicit pictures of any model on the internet, you have no idea what the circumstances were. She might have been paid 6 times as much as normal for that shoot. Those pictures might have been taken 10 years ago. The pictures might have been taken by her, or perhaps her partner at the time. She might have been doing an experiment. Those pictures might have been taken without her knowledge or consent. Have some credibility. Book her for the stuff she advertises, because then you are guaranteed to have a shoot that's within her levels and within the bounds of what she's actually capable of doing. And that way, you're likely to have an extremely positive shoot. What do you think, Amelia Jane? Yes, I think that's excellent advice. So, from me and Amelia Jane, that's all for now. This was a very ranty, angry post, but I'm afraid I've been wanting to say it for a very long time. Not just because of my own experiences, but because of the experiences I hear regularly from a great plethora of other models. The majority of the people listening to this video, if you are photographers, the chances are you've never done any of these things wrong. You've probably treated us in an exemplary fashion. But unfortunately, there is a significant minority of people treating models abysmally and not really understanding why they're not anyone's go-to photographer. So I hope in some way that I've been helpful to you. And if you're a sister model of mine watching this, I would also just like to say it's okay to say if a photographer isn't treating you like a library book. I'm not good at doing this myself and I'm trying to get better at it. It's taken me far too long in my career to own it. So even if you're a new model, try owning it immediately. I definitely recommend it. It feels great. Doesn't mean to be unpleasant. Library books aren't unpleasant, are they? Perfectly nice they are. But it is not the same as owning your own book. I suggest you marry one. And it's goodbye from me.
Amelia, do a grand jeté on turn on. Oh, you'll be all right up there, Amelia. You're perfectly safe and it'll make a great photo. Okay, can you just face round towards me a bit more? Not quite, just a bit more. Yeah, just one bit more. Oh, perfect. Just open up a bit, will you? Will you just open up a bit? Can you get any further down than that? I saw a dancer in the Royal Ballet doing the splits. Ow. Oh, aren't you comfortable? Well, I just want you to hold it until about sunset.
Well, I know it's 9 o'clock, but we did stop for a coffee around 11, so actually I've still got 3 more hours of your time I've booked. You know what, Harold?
Fuck off!